And then at some point, or probably I imagine around this time near the kind of the apex of this ride,
Yeah.
you get a call from Samsung.
Yeah. I mean, there's three companies, another one of the big appliance companies, and one of the world's slash the one of the world's biggest technology companies all rang up at roughly the same time. Like in the 6-month period of time, we had three serious acquirers wanting to buy us, and a bunch of other ones on the side saying, maybe, would you be open to it? But like three of them were like, kind of term sheet level interest, like real interest, right? Flying people into our offices, saying, "Hey, can we
Wow.
buy you?" And it was a really good time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Spoon Podcast. My name is Mike Wolf. I'm your host, and on today's show we have Nick Holzherr, the founder of Whisk and head of Samsung Food. Those of you in the Smart Kitchen probably know a little bit about Nick and the rise of Whisk and its eventual acquisition by Samsung. It's been one of the true success stories in this space. To me, Whisk was always interesting because they were really the first recipe startup that was applying and exploring how to use AI to recipes. And as I found out in this interview, Nick and his team really were building everything from scratch in those early days, including buying GPUs, chips to power computers to run his AI models, starting a decade ago, well before the availability of large language models like ChatGPT. So we talk about that, and we also talk about Nick's early days as a founder of Whisk when he went on the British version of The Apprentice, appearing before Lord Sugar, essentially the BBC version of Donald Trump. And as you'll hear, Nick got all the way to the finals, and while he didn't win it, it certainly opened lots of doors and resulted in him getting lots of meetings to pitch the company. Over the years, his company grew. He was working with grocers in Europe, and eventually appliance companies started calling him. And over time, as he grew more and more, he started getting interest in buying the company. Nick tells us the story of those heady days when he had 3 companies bidding to buy Whisk. We also talk about what Nick is excited about and where he sees the use of AI going in the future. It was a really good interview, and I'm excited to see Nick in Seattle at the Smart Kitchen Summit, where he'll be giving a talk on how AI will change the consumer meal journey. If you'd like to see Nick and like to hear him and see him in person, I'd encourage you to get tickets to the Smart Kitchen Summit. Head to Seattle. You can use the discount code podcast to get 15% off tickets. I hope to see you there. This is the first of a series of interviews we'll be releasing over the next few weeks, with folks coming to SKS, and all I have to say is get ready for lots of great content. All right, that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Nick Holzherr. Oh man, well, Nick just told me whatever I throw at him, he's ready for, especially with that new microphone, Nick. You look great in that in your little room there, the microphone.
It's new. It's like 3 months old. I realized I needed to start upping my game when everyone's podcasting now, right?
Everyone's podcasting, and so Nick Holzherr. When's the Nick Holzherr podcast start? By the way,
I haven't got my own podcast, but I've been invited to.
You're just guessing. You're just
If
guessing.
anybody wants to invite me onto theirs, I've now got a good mic.
Yeah. Well, Nick, I feel like I've known you probably since 2016, 2017. I think Whisk was the first company I remember that was really talking up AI and recipes. Like you kind of going way back. That was one of your original stories you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started with the problem that like users want to use recipes anywhere, and not just from like one manufacturer or one publisher or one grocery company or like one tech startup with like a couple hundred recipes. And then the only way to really make that happen is with AI. With make if you want to have a smart experience, that is, like use AI to be able to parse all these recipes and make them smart. So we did that, but that was before deep learning before it was accessible to startups. So we were literally flying out on planes to America, buying the latest latest chips, graphics cards, and like using them with like basically PhDs, ex-professors that we had hired to build these models.
Wow.
Just really early in AI, before TensorFlow, before like these libraries. Of course,
that's
now
crazy.
Totally
Really, you're buying your own NVIDIA chips and like putting them into like computers to power your own machine learning. That's crazy. Yeah. So I think let's go back a little bit of history. We're gonna like kind of go through the whole story a little bit with Samsung, but Nick's going, oh great, it's a retrospective. This is your life, Nick. But like,
This is where you're
I
taking
was,
it, Mike. You could go anywhere.
yes,
This is where
yes.
you're taking it.
I was looking back in history a little bit, and I didn't realize Whisk had started back in 2012. And I was looking at, or maybe before then, and you were actually on like a British TV show, British Apprentice, on the
Yep.
BBC.
Yep.
Was it pitching Whisk at the time?
It actually was, yeah. I mean, it was. It's called The Apprentice, and it's the same thing as basically Donald Trump has in the US, right? And we have like a different person running it called.
Unfortunately,
called
yeah.
Yeah, the guy in the UK is called Lord Sugar, and he's actually was a advisor or member of the Labour Party, which is the other side of the is the left side of the government. So it's kind of the opposite of not the opposite of Donald Trump, but kind of a little bit the opposite of Donald Trump. There are some similarities too, but the
way better name. Lord Sugar is a way better name, by the way. Like,
yeah, he was originally Sir, I think, and then they made him a Lord. This is kind of the British monarchy kind of system, which is also hilarious. But yeah, it was amazing fun. I mean, you do 12 weeks of tasks competing against other people. And then if you get to the final, you get to pitch your business plan. And then if you win, he gives you money and he becomes a partner in your business. And I got to the final and I didn't win. But because it was such a popular TV show, I got to pitch it to him and his advisors, therefore the UK. Afterwards, everyone wanted to invest in it. Well, not everyone, but enough people wanted to invest in it. And then most people would take the meetings with me, right? So like, I got like inbound from like a lot of the big grocery stores and publishers and stuff saying, "Hey, we'd love to work with you."
Tesco's of the world came in with you, say, "Hey, let's meet." Nick, emails.
Yeah, let's meet.
And was it immediate? Like the next day, like flood of inbox?
Yeah. No, yeah, literally that night, like my inbox, my LinkedIn and my inbox just filled up with loads of people who wanted to work, who said, "I love it. I know he didn't invest, but can I invest or can I work with you? Can I use it? Please let me." And then the ones who hadn't, when I messaged them, months later and said, "Hey, this is the idea. I pitched it on The Apprentice." They would take the meeting, not necessarily because they're interested, but just because they go, "Oh, I'll meet the guy who's on TV."
The curiosity of meeting you, right?
And for a salesperson, that's what you kind of need, right? The foot in the door. You can also waste a bunch of time, obviously, in meetings that people are not actually interested in buying anything.
It was the predecessor, I feel, to like Shark Tank, which is also Dragon's Den in the UK. Yeah. In that, like, it's the value for you as an entrepreneur is it's just a giant commercial. Like, it's just like it's multi-episode with Apprentice. With Shark Tank, it's like one episode, but like they play them so much and so repeat them so frequently. The value is in the millions of dollars in terms of free publicity.
It's huge. And it's also actually fun. I mean, it is really, really fun. It is also challenging because it's not a show about business success. It's about a show about conflict, essentially, right? Of like people conflicting and trying to make something work. It's like a business assault course. So you're kind of like they put you through psychometric and tests and psychology interviews and to basically choose people that they think will conflict with each other and create good TV. So that part is stressful, but you also get to do some really cool things on the show, like build products super quickly and pitch them to big people, and so it's really fun. But ultimately,
that's awesome.
It was the platform I needed to get Whisk started.
And so you got Whisk started, and I think I connected with you in around, like I said, 2016, 2017. So those early days when you had the business plan, what you pitched on Apprentice BBC versus like when I met you around like 2016, what had changed? Obviously you'd started the company, went from business plan to actually starting this thing, but had the vision changed at all?
I mean, the core mission to help people cook, make it more joyful as we talk about it today, but basically help them in that process hadn't changed. But what had changed was we started off with a consumer app and we couldn't get it to what we thought was enough scale. So what we pivoted from, trying to build a consumer app to looking at all that tech we had built. And you started off talking about, AI. We'd built a lot of AI way back, 10, 12 years ago, right? And so we were really early in that. And businesses wanted to use that. And we knew that because we had, in our consumer app vision time, we had basically built like widgets that publishers could integrate on their sites. And through that, we had loads of conversations with big publishers and big retailers and big CPG brands. And a lot of them said, "We love this widget. Yes, we'll integrate it, but can we also use some of the other tech?" So come 2016, 2015, 2014, And then in 2016, we couldn't make the consumer app work. So we pivoted into a B2B platform, offered all the tech that we had built, but for anybody to use, built an API platform for people to use. That then was used by, we were powering 500 million monthly consumer interactions at one point. At the height of it, which was pretty impressive. And powering it for a lot of the big players in the world, like a lot of big CPG brands. And if you made a list of the top players, I'm not sure, maybe
on their websites. And also, were you on like publisher websites?
Yeah, the biggest, right? Food Network, All Recipes, BBC Good Food, like the about.com, like the big sites with many tens of millions of hits a month, users. Those were integrating us, and we were sending them across to grocery retailers like Walmart, Amazon, Instacart, the UK ones like Tesco, and the big CPG brands wanted a part of it because they wanted to have their products featured. So when it's butter, they want it to be the Unilever butter, or when it's stock, the Unilever stock, right? Okay. So they cared about that, and they also wanted to connect their own websites to commerce. Because we had those integrations, they then said, "Can you power more of our platform?" We said yes. Then all the big IoT companies came along and said, "Hey," as in the appliance manufacturers came along and said, "Hey, can we use your platform as well?" So we were powering a whole bunch of different IoT players. And that's, I think, where you and I first started talking. I think, some of the big appliance manufacturers started using us.
But so just real quickly, you were with the publishers. And you were essentially doing shoppable recipes. So like Bisquick, exactly. Nestle wants their yogurt or whatever. That was like, you were one of the pioneers in the whole kind of shoppable recipe concept. And that was around the 2013, 2014 timeframe.
That's right. I mean, there was Constant Commerce, which are no longer there, but that Constant Commerce were at the same kind of time as us, like super, super early, but it was basically only Constant Commerce and us. And we took a different approach to them. They were like more enterprisey in their proposition. So some of the big enterprisey like what players wanted them, but we were more like open and like, let's integrate the whole market kind of sort of game. So someone wanted us, and we had a bit more. It was a B2C to a B2B to C kind of play where we integrated onto their sites, and then when they added to a shopping list, it would still be our shopping list, and users could save the recipe into our recipe boxes. Our consumer experience was always there, but it was integrated on other people's sites and shops and brands.
And the appliance guys showed up around the 2015, 2016 timeframe. And what were they asking you? Hey, we want apps. We want people to have recipes. What were they showing up with, and what questions they have?
I mean, it was like, we want to connect our appliances. So can you give us recipes in a structured way, or can you make it work with so people can turn on our appliance at the right temperature?
It was the guided recipe era, in a sense, right?
Exactly. But definitely what you said, which is shoppable recipes, was also, I think everybody always thinks and starts in that somewhere in the early stages of developing an experience like that, thinks, I want to make money. How do I make money? I make it by connecting to commerce. So let me connect to commerce. So that was definitely part of the game as well. And then what happened was, really at that point, still, I would say, offering what we were offering was in its infancy. It was not like a mainstream thing to do. And it was really around that 2016, 2017 mark where suddenly the e-commerce market had grown. Penetration of e-commerce had doubled or tripled from what it was back in 2012. And it obviously has gone way further still now. And you suddenly have everyone wanting it. And it was kind of a crazy time where we had struggled as a business. Honestly, we had struggled until 2016, 2017. And suddenly they were like inundated with everyone saying, hey, can we use your platform? And we suddenly became profitable. We went from like 5 people to 30 people in like a year, not from any investment, by the way, just revenue. Like we had no investment at that point. We were just, everything was bootstrapped. It was, we were making money, and the business was profitable. And it was like, wow, this is really fun. Like, wow, what is it like to make money? Yeah. The startup making money. Like, what is
nice.
this?
It's nice to make money. And how was the money coming in? You were doing these recipes, and were you kind of taking like every recipe impression that went through? You got a little bit of money. Was there like big appliance company wants to pay you to do a custom integration, so they're writing a big check? How was the money coming in?
All of those. So we had 3 revenue models. We had the license fee model, a monthly fee for the API. We had a grocery per click or per new customer fee, which was small fee per transaction, but when you add it all up, works out relatively well. And then we also had an ad model where you, as a CPG company, if you're Nestle and you want to get your yogurt sold, or your yogurt, as the British say, you pay to have your yogurt featured. It doesn't say Nestle yogurt in the recipe, but yes, Nestle yogurt the customer gets, right? And so they don't pay on a per acquisition there. They pay on a per view, because you're inspiring the customer. You're not just selling the customer.
Got it. Okay. And so things went crazy. You ramped up, you had 30 employees and you're making money. Life is good. And then at some point, or probably I imagine around this time, near the kind of the apex of this ride,
yeah,
you get a call from Samsung.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 companies. Another one of the big appliance companies, and one of the world's one of the world's biggest technology companies, all rang up at roughly the same time. Like in a 6-month period of time, we had 3 serious acquirers wanting to buy us, and a bunch of other ones on the side saying, maybe, would you be open to it? But like 3 of them were like, kind of term sheet level interest, like real interest, right? Flying people into our offices, saying, "Hey, can we buy you?" And it was a really good time for we were profitable, and
that's
we
exciting.
Need to sell.
And you're looking at, and you're just thinking in your head, Lord Sugar, you should have made the better offer. So you had these 3 offers, and I'm just kidding, but like a technology platform company, a big two big appliance companies, it sounds like. And at some point, were they kind of competing against each other, or? And also part B of that question, were you inviting them in, or just they are all like, hey, their head of acquisitions calls you up?
The latter. We were not inviting them. They were ringing us. Like, and this was kind of what's crazy about it, because like initially I was even like saying no to them, not to the acquisition teams, but to the initial kind of integrations. I was like, why do you want to integrate it to an appliance? Like, are we going to get any users from this? Like, I was in the user head like mind, right? Like, am I going to make any transactions? Like, how many fridges have you got live? Like, how many users are going to click on it? Am I going to make enough money on this to like make it worthwhile, visiting your office? Because often these large enterprises, their request is, can you visit our office to pitch this certain person? And I was like,
you're busy.
Apprehensive. I was like, you're wasting my time. Like,
you have 30 employees. Yeah, you're busy.
We're busy, yeah. And then the funny thing is, of course, like, those conversations ended up with the M&A team suddenly getting interested, and they're like, because they're looking at it going, hang on, many people in the market are using it, our competitors are using it, like, who's going to end up owning this? They probably knew that M&A stuff was happening because the people in the industry know each other quite well, so they probably all started worrying, like, oh no, what happens if the other person wins it? And that's a great place to be as a startup, right? So it was literally the perfect time. I could probably got a better price for it if I'd held on another few years, but it's impossible to price it. It's impossible to get the right time, and it was certainly a good time.
Yeah.
It was a good time, and I'm happy with what worked out.
I think it was a good time, and Samsung is an interesting company. Did you have to fly out to Seoul to pitch?
No, I did. I had flown out to Seoul multiple times. In the after we had a partnership with them, because we started powering loads of stuff for them, right? It became a really good partnership where we were powering way more than initially was requested. We were building some like new features because of based on with their budgets and based on their requests and their needs, and it was being used across lots of appliances, and had a vision to being used by lots of other divisions as well, which is what ultimately ended up happening, of course, but that we couldn't predict that at the time. But then I did fly a bunch to San Francisco, because the acquisition team was called Samsung Next. It was an innovation arm of Samsung.
Yeah.
And basically HQ, because it's quite hard for like the Korean team to buy stuff because of like how Samsung is structured, they asked the innovation arm, hey, can you guys take a look at this? And they did, and they did the acquisitions. So actually, our bosses, if you like, or our acquirers was the San Francisco entity of Samsung.
And so that deal comes through, you accept it. I think I remember being in Chicago at the Housewares show. I think when I interviewed you about that deal, I think is right. So there must have been like around the March timeframe. That's what Housewares is. 2018, 2019, one of those years.
Yep.
And it's been an interesting ride. I think this year a lot's probably happened. So maybe talk about like, okay, you get acquired by Samsung. What's that like initially? Kind of absorbing you into this giant Borg, which is it's a massive company. Even though it's like the next company, like the San Francisco companies, but it's still Samsung.
Yeah, it is. Actually, what I would say is what I've been really pleasantly surprised by is how much autonomy they've given us and how much they've let us keep parts of the culture that matter. We were always a distributed team, and they've let us keep that, and that was a massive, advantage during COVID when it was so difficult if you were not a distributed team. But it also allowed us to kind of operate, I think, quite effectively. So. And keep some of the culture we have. Like we go on annual offsites where we fly everyone to one place in the world. Like that's not a normal thing in an enterprise to explain to your HQ that, hey, we're going to fly the whole team to Greece or something, right? So and they support that. So that's been awesome.
You go to Greece for your offsites? What the heck?
Well, we have to fly somewhere, and actually Greece ends up being quite.
Yeah, that's true.
Greece is our next one. We actually haven't been to Greece yet, but like the previous one, Cyprus, we did one in Korea.
Nice.
That was the most expensive one we did. But we did Lisbon, Madrid, Budapest, and these places are actually, if you look at them on spreadsheet, the cheapest places to fly everyone. But it is also nice. It's also fun to actually spend a week together. And meet people in person, especially if you're working in a distributed environment. So we spend a lot of time building a distributed culture and making sure that people felt valued and motivated and knew what they're doing. And Samsung let us keep that. So I'm really grateful and respect Samsung for that. What was crazy was some of the enterprise ways of managing a business, right? Like that, it definitely added a layer of complexity, and that's inevitable with any enterprise.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing that was crazy was scaling. So they wanted us to scale our team from 30 people to 120, and they asked me to do it in ASAP. But I did it in 9 months. So going from 30 to 120 in 9 months is an experience that I'm not, maybe I'll do it again, but it was intense. The amount of interviews you have to do, the amount of how to integrate that at the same time as integrating your company to a large enterprise like Samsung, right? So all of that in one go was probably the most intensive 6 months of work that I've ever done. Real a massive learning curve. Again, hard work, but I learned a bunch, and I'm grateful for the experience.
Were you in on almost every one of those interviews and decisions? You were pretty hands-on, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you grow to 120. That's impressive, and I think the company over time, I saw more and more getting integrated, and I think that the culmination of that was this past CES when I think it essentially transformed from Whisk to Samsung Food. I think so. Samsung Food was kind of a big announcement for Samsung at CES 2024 in January, but the heart of that, the beating heart of that was really the Whisk acquisition, right? It's kind of almost a rebranding of Whisk.
Yeah, that's right. And there are two sides, right, of that. Whether it was is it a good idea or was it a bad idea? So I built the Whisk brand, right? I own a bunch of Whisk. Yeah. I'm drinking out of a Whisk flask right now. Whisk is part of my
the Whisk swag. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hey, kill Whisk, right? As a brand. And some users felt that too. But ultimately, there is a thing with any enterprise probably. If you're trying to build an app that is brand comes across as not from here, and not is a third party, you're going to struggle getting integration into the different hardware units, and you're going to struggle integrating into the Samsung ecosystem. And ultimately, if you're building a consumer experience, you have to leverage the distribution of a platform like Samsung. Samsung has one of the most devices in the world of any company. I think it probably has the most devices of any company if you add all the different units, because it's so broad in what it does. TVs and mobiles and obviously kitchen appliances, and watches and now rings. It's everything, right? So we had to use that distribution, and the most effective way of doing that was to leverage, to basically call ourselves Samsung Foods. And actually, that has worked. In terms of the integrations we have planned, and the ones we've achieved, but ones we've now have on the table that are going to happen over the next 6-12 months. I think it's part of what I'm actually most excited about in where we're going is especially with the health, because food and health are so closely coupled with, obesity and diabetes and other things. Yet no one has really solved that. And actually people have worked on it, but no one's really solved it. And I think Samsung has got an important part to play because they have health and food appliances. And I think if we do that, that's actually a really important thing in the world that we're doing. I feel proud, something I feel proud of and passionate about. And that I find awesome. So that is, Samsung Food as a brand, I know that people are split on the opinion, right? And I actually think it's a good name, and there's lots of advantages of the name. If you're looking at 10 food apps or 20 food apps
You're going to see Samsung food.
You'll notice it and you'll probably try it. Like
Yeah,
your propensity to try out the app is higher. But of course, Samsung hasn't got a huge like plethora of successful apps. So that's part of also what we're helping Samsung with.
Yeah, I think that when I think of Samsung Food or Samsung with your appliances, you have the wearables, you have what you built in Whisk. There's a lot of different parts of the puzzle there. And I think, I think you're almost on a collision course with some of the other folks who are just building kind of coming at it from the precision nutrition side. Like I look at January AI, which is a pretty cool app. They do like take a photo of food and you can predict blood sugar. It seems like makes sense that ultimately that type of functionality would be built into what Samsung has because you guys have so many other parts of the puzzle. So I see you guys have a great foundation. A lot of it's built on the appliance and the wearables and then and the app side.
Yeah. And I think that's what's exciting about the sensors, right? If you've got access to sensors and distribution through the hardware and the brand, then I think that gives you some good starting Lego bricks. It's not the whole solution. And like, of course, it's such a big problem in the world. Like it's such a big proportion of the world are going to suffer from the health challenges of not eating healthily. Of course, there's going to be thousands of companies, and I hope that a lot of them are successful. Alongside, obviously, I hope we're successful. But I think there's an interesting role to play for us there.
A lot of people are just thinking, hey, well, now we could just take a pill and I will no longer be at risk for type 2 diabetes. I'll lose 50 pounds. But I think that's not going to be realistic. You can't have like half the world's population who's at risk for type 2 taking medication or a shot. So I think what you guys are building could be really interesting. I think it's going to be a few years though, because a lot of these different things need to come together, but it'll be an interesting thing. So that sounds like what that's driving you. What else is driving you as you look forward towards 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line in this space? What is really exciting for you?
I think the advances in AI are exciting for everyone in the space, including us. We tried to do stuff like Vision AI, use your camera to detect items of food 2-3 years ago and failed, right? It wasn't good enough. And that was not, despite having good engineers on it, right? It was hard to do. Yet now you come along and you use, an open source library by OpenAI, and boom, it works, right? Sure, it needs tuning and it needs some work, and it takes a little bit of work to get it to production level, but it's so easy. And stuff that we spent 10 years building, is now you can now use the OpenAI API for it and get a good way there, which is so scary for people who've invested a whole bunch of time and effort into building really, really advanced technology that actually so much of it's now easier than ever to do, which means it's open to anybody. And so the scary part is well, how do you win? If everyone can do it, how do you win?
Yeah.
But the fun thing from a consumer side is it's going to be possible to build some of the stuff that we all hoped would be there 5 years ago. And now it'll finally, I think, get to a point where it'll be better and usable and actually start adding value. So the smart kitchen, there's always the question is, how far off a truly smart kitchen that actually adds value to the user are we? When will it stop being a gimmick? And when will it actually start being smart and useful? And I think we're getting closer and closer and closer to that being true, right? And of course, it's true in some ways already. Some devices are fantastic in adding value. But on a macro level where I can talk to my mum and say, do you want a smart kitchen? And she goes, yes, actually I do, because it adds loads of value.
Yeah. It's not just turning things on and off with an app and making things more difficult by adding more processes in the way and kind of app friction. It's actually making it more useful. And so going from those early days where you're buying GPUs and trying to figure out to build AI and going on TV, and then ultimately to where you are today, it's quite a ride. It's been fun talking to you, Nick, about hearing about all this. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in Seattle.
Yeah, we'll see you in Seattle at Smart Kitchen Summit. Everyone who wants to see Nick in person, famous TV star, apprentice star. I'm just embarrassing you. You can see him in Seattle. All right, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's my conversation with Nick Holzherr, head of Samsung Food, founder of Whisk. And as you can see, Nick has been there for the last decade building AI-powered tools for the consumer kitchen. So I'm really excited to hear him and see him in Seattle about 3 weeks from now to talk about where all this is going. Once again, if you are coming to SKS, you could connect with Nick as well. If you want to come, just use the discount code podcast at checkout at smartkitchensummit.com. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already rated us, please go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast and give us a rating. It's super helpful for us. As I said at the top of the show, we got a bunch of content coming, so stay tuned for more of that later this week. This podcast is brought to you by me, Michael Wolf, and The Spoon, and we are part of the Spoon Podcast Network. All right, folks, that's it for now. We'll talk to y'all soon.